Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France24 debate, discussions over surveillance and how to keep people safe, but also protect their privacy, taking place on both sides of the Rhine. This Tuesday here in France, Parliament overwhelmingly approving a new surveillance bill. In a moment, we'll be speaking with Jessica Salz, who is with us from Berlin, about the row in Germany over a spying scandal where the government's agency is accused of snooping on its allies on behalf of the NSA. With us to talk about it, Fabrice Epelboin, who teaches political, I'm always interested, information warfare at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. So what typically is on the curriculum of when you teach information warfare?
Well, basically how to use information as a weapon in a propaganda war, which is basically what we're living every day. I mean, if you take a topic like Ukraine,
how to spin stories?
How to spin story, how to do some storytelling, using politics in order to convince people, and how to fight the other side. Ukraine is a terrific topic for this right now.
How each side paints the other as the bad guy.
Yeah, if you look at The Guardian, for example, the New York Times, who are definitely not pro-Putin, and you see how they cover Ukraine, and look at the way the French press cover Ukraine, and you will see that there is a serious lack of democracy in France, very serious lack of democracy. And there is no way you can say The Guardian is pro-Putin. The Guardian is everything but pro-Putin, but still, when they report something about the Ukraine, there are facts. Those are journalists.
All right, you take a dim view to France's democracy after that passage of that bill. We're talking about it as well with David Nakache, a cryptologist at the University of Paris. From London, Eva Bloom-Dumontet, advocacy officer at Privacy International, joins us, as well as Jessica Salz in Berlin. David Nakache, before we talk about Germany, what do you think about the mood in this country today? And what did you anticipate when those attacks took place back in January? How did you think the government was going to respond?
It was a question of time. I'm a forensic expert as well, and I do a lot of analysis of computer systems, mobile phones, when these come to an investigation. And in such cases, we really pull out from the device nearly everything which is inside and write reports on that. We already were using a very broad definition of our mission. Basically, whenever you get a mission from a judge, it always ends by, and you will make any observation useful for the manifestation of truth, meaning that basically whatever you find, you can put in your report. So it was just a matter of making this systematic, giving it a framework, and I think that...
By the way, one intelligence service boss quoted by the French news agency saying, if this new panel that we have to go see, it's too much red tape. If we go see them once, twice, the third time we won't go see them.
Okay, it only commits the person who said that. You can never know if they will actually or not. I think that the big issue that we are facing in this debate is as we rightly said, the devil is in the details. I would just illustrate it with a very simple example. When I say paracetamol, I'm talking about a very specific medication. You know what the molecule is, and you know exactly what we're talking about. If I say ecstasy, you don't know what this preparation is. It can be prepared in any basement using any components, and this is why ecstasy is very dangerous, because we don't know exactly what's inside. It can be any mixture done by any clandestine laboratory. When you say that networks are put under surveillance by algorithms that pick people and pick criteria, algorithm is a very generic name. It's like ecstasy. You don't know what's inside. It can be any criteria. The criteria can be a very strict one, a very lenient one. It may pick 99.99% of people and process the big data that they generate, or it can be just 0.0.1.
And for what you're saying, is it that the lawmakers are behind the curve?
The lawmakers just give the framework, and then it would be actually the state services who are going to use this framework, who are going to comply with the text.
And when it comes to algorithms, how are French spies compared to, say, the NSA or the Germans?
Well, they're more focused, from what I know. They're more focused. They use very focused tools to try and dig deep rather than large. So there are a number of areas where we see those people in conferences. We see them. We see what they publish as well. I mean, the state services also publish things, ANSSI, and they have researchers in cryptology. There are some areas that they're very careful about.
All right, so there's a French way of making those algorithms.
Yeah, definitely. There's a French history of those algorithms, of those black box. The Americans started big from scratch. The French started very small by selling those black box to very small countries like Tunisia or Libya, who were quite easy. It's still a major technical challenge, but putting all Libya with something like 8 or 9 million people and very few people using the internet under surveillance is not as hard as putting the whole country like France under surveillance. So we started small and we learn and we grow from small country to a massive continental surveillance system. We are today monitoring most of the Middle East, most of Africa, and of course, France and many allies.
All right, so a creep factor, if you will, in intelligence. Now, over in Germany, the Grand Coalition government of Angela Merkel feeling the strain of revelations that the BND spy agency snooped on behalf of the NSA. Airbus has filed a criminal complaint, so have the Austrians now. Merkel's social democratic coalition partners want answers over alleged spying on the French presidency, the French foreign ministry, and whether data that was supposed to be limited to counterterrorism instead extended to industrial espionage.
If there really was a contribution from the BND to industrial espionage, which goes beyond the well-known case of EADS, well, that would be very serious indeed.
Not so, says Merkel's interior minister, Thomas de Maizière, who denies his ministry misled parliament when it stated as recently as April 14th that it had no knowledge of alleged U.S. economic spying in Europe and of Germany's alleged involvement. De Maizière should know, if it's true, he used to be Merkel's chief of staff and as such oversaw intelligence. As for the chancellor herself, she insists the BND was, quote, under control, and if needed, she'd say so herself before the Bundestag.
I still consider it to be an important question as to whether or not friends should spy on each other, and the answer to that should be no, it shouldn't happen. Secondly, I'd like to say that the Chancellery will answer all the questions of the parliamentary body responsible for looking into the matter.
Jessica Saltz, this is the woman who complained when the NSA tapped her own cell phone. How much is this putting the Grand Coalition under strain?
Well, I think this certainly is a problem for Merkel. This opposition in the parliament and indeed the Social Democrats, Angela Merkel's coalition, have really jumped on this scandal. It's a chance to label the Chancellor a hypocrite and completely criticise her government for their actions. But now that the scandal is calming down in its second week, some cynics or perhaps realists are pointing out that this is a chance really for the Social Democrats to gain some sort of party political advantages by stepping out from behind Angela Merkel's shadow a bit, and that the outrage they feel is perhaps, if not false, then certainly exaggerated. Not to say that this isn't a scandal in Germany, of course it is, and it's certainly one that's really affected the German people, who of course take their privacy very personally, and who, as you said, were really shocked and horrified in 2013 when it was revealed that their own chancellor had been spied on by the NSA. Many people now are saying, well, this is just what happens. We've got to understand that between countries, countries will always protect their domestic interests. As Angela Merkel said, spying on friends isn't a good thing. But, many experts here saying, well, that's just kind of what happens between countries, and they're always going to look after their national interests. Angela Merkel
Jessica,
has said,
this is the country, of course, that is still haunted by the all-seeing, all-knowing East German secret police, the Stasi, under when it was a pro-Soviet state.
Yes, absolutely, and that's why I'm saying that I think that the outrage that's felt by the government and parliamentarians isn't necessarily genuine. I think even members of the SPD would know about the BND's actions, but certainly there is shock felt by German civilians who are certainly horrified, and I think this could affect Angela Merkel's popularity. I don't think it's enough to give it a huge knock, but as you're right to say that Germans take their privacy incredibly seriously. They feel that their country really suffered under state surveillance under fascism, and also, of course, more recently in East Germany during the Cold War, and that many people still have that fresh in their memories. And in 2013, when it was revealed that Angela Merkel was spied on, and in fact many German citizens may have been spied on, thousands of people took to the streets, and people continue to protest to protect these privacy laws in Germany. So it's something that is very personal, and Germans are very sensitive about. But in terms of the media furor around the scandal and the outrage that's playing out in the Parliament, I think that might be slightly exaggerated.
But Jessica, we were talking a minute ago about the impact of the Paris terror attacks on public opinion in this country. When this agreement between the German intelligence agency and the NSA came into being, it was 2002. And Germans at the time were haunted by the fact that the 9/11 attacks were in part plotted from Hamburg.
Yes, exactly. And this is also going back to the GroKo tensions. The person who was on Schroeder's side when he signed the agreement after 9/11 for the BND to work with the NSA was Frank-Walter Steinmeier, who's still a leader of the SPD. So he will also have questions to answer. Exactly, and the foreign minister. The relationship between Germany's foreign intelligence and the NSA is inextricable, and it remains inextricable today. And many saying that this is the reason that the BND has had to sort of collaborate with the NSA. Now, Angela Merkel has to be careful, of course, to show that Germany's foreign intelligence isn't just a toy for the NSA to play around with, and that the German foreign intelligence is just dictated to by the NSA. She has to be careful, certainly, as to how she navigates this scandal. Yeah, certainly.
All right, Fabrice Epelboin, two questions on the heels of that. First of all, will we one day find out revelations that the French helped the NSA spy on the Germans?
Most certainly. The RAND Corporation, which is a very conservative think tank and very clever when it comes to mass surveillance, issued a report yesterday stating that France should be integrated into the Five Eyes Alliance, which is well known by the name of Echelon. So today, the Americans are considering that their first ally, when it comes to mass global surveillance, we're not talking about a country, we're talking about the whole world, their first ally on the European continent is France. Before the UK, before Germany. France has the ability to put a whole continent under mass surveillance that is totally unique. Totally unique. The English cannot do that, the German cannot do that, the French can. If you want to know what's happening in Africa, who is talking to who, or in the Middle East, only the French can know that. The Americans, by themselves, cannot have access to this information.
David Nakash?
Yes, indeed. A lot of those countries actually deploy and use equipment sold by French firms, what we call the first circle firms, which are very close to the defense complex. And as such, I think that what has just been said is accurate.
All right, so there's the broader issue, which we thought would be addressed when the Edward Snowden revelations came out, and that is, can you regulate the spying game? It comes back to what you were saying about the creep factor, about how these spy agencies get ahead of their own governments.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's obviously too late for that. Those black box we today have legalized and put on our own network have been designed for people like Gaddafi. So there's no way it's going to work in a democracy and preserve a democracy. We are putting something that is going to kill every hope of democracy. The best way to figure this out is to imagine what would happen if Marine Le Pen got elected.
The leader of the far-right National Front.
The far-right National Party was elected on the next presidential election in 2 years, which is a real possibility. Let's face it, it is a real possibility. What would happen if Marine Le Pen was president of France? What would she do with those black box? Everything's possible. Look at the law and ask yourself, what would Marine Le Pen do? What is the threat here? And the law really answered this question. There is lots of issues that hasn't been fixed by the law. Everything could happen.
Eva Bloom-Dumontet, do you agree that it's too late to regulate the spying game?
Well, without necessarily talking about the spying game, just focusing still on this bill, and I really hope it's not too late. I think there is still room to try and act when it's going to go through the Senate and through the Constitutional Council as well. So I think I would definitely not say it's too late. I think we have to keep on actually demanding legal framework on intelligence services, and not the sort that the governments, like the Valls government, has been suggesting we have, one that's both veiled, one that's invasive, but one that actually constrain the intelligence services and make them serve us as the population, the people, and respect us, and not give them the power to act against our interests. And I think it was absolutely outrageous to see Mr. Urquhart saying that this was not a French Patriot Act, in the sense that this was not widespread monitoring. I mean, if this is not widespread monitoring, what is it? And I think it's dangerous. I mean, it's a dangerous game they are playing. But I definitely hope that there is still room to actually provide a framework to control this spy game.
David Nakache, can you regulate it? I'm haunted a little bit by what you said earlier about the lawmakers looking with glazed eyes when the people from the intelligence agencies come and present them with the data, and they seem a little overwhelmed by what they're being asked to approve.
Yes, I think that what we'll see now is a shift in the production of tools that can assert privacy, even in the presence of government spying. Awareness that people will begin installing and managing properly their systems. Companies that propose independent audit security services that would flourish. Probably this would be the reaction. Basically, if you cannot trust your environment, take the proper measures to generate your own security and maintain it.
Jessica Saltz, in Germany, we talked earlier about how the right to privacy is something that's really important. But is there this conversation between, most Generation Y people who say, I don't care about privacy so much, and those who are older?
Absolutely not. I think that's what's interesting, that young people, from teenagers upwards, certainly people that I've spoken to, still consider privacy to be so important, and consider privacy laws so important, consider internet privacy so important. And that is why parties, especially on the left wing of the political spectrum, have really integrated this into their policies, because they realize that this is something that the younger generation also is so deems so important. It's something that is very personal to Germans, and you would think that maybe it would be a generational thing, but it really isn't. It's a different, perhaps it's a different cultural thing here, but certainly Germans consider privacy incredibly important, and that is why I think this scandal here is certainly still having its ripple effect.
Fabrice Epelboin, are your students, do they jealously guard their privacy?
They have a very different definition of privacy. There is a clear generation gap between my generation and older, who thought there was a clear limit between private and public. And within the younger generation, this limit is way more sophisticated. They have many levels of privacy. They have many levels of being public. And it's way more sophisticated than my generation thought privacy was, because basically...
So it's a misreading to say that young people just put it all out there on Facebook and whatever.
Absolute misreading. Absolute misreading. Young people are very aware of what privacy is. They're playing with it, actually. And they're sometimes are playing foolishly with it. Thinking, especially on Facebook, you can see lots of young people acting foolishly with their privacy, but they're learning. Acting in a foolish way is a way to learn when you're a teenager, and they're doing this with their privacy. In my time, we didn't have the tools to play with the privacy. We didn't have the tools to have multiple personality unless you're schizophrenic, we didn't have the tools to have different personality and test different personality and proceed by iteration into the grown-up world. Today's kids have those tools, and they are
so hang on a
incredibly
sec,
mature
because
for that.
in part one of the discussion, you said democracy's dead. David Nakash saying, what's going to happen now is there's going to be a pendulum swing.
What's his describing?
And that pendulum
is
swing is going to be that the people will think for themselves how to defend their privacy.
That's called crypto-anarchy. It's not democracy. It's a totally different concept. Once you have the whole population using cryptology, you get into crypto-anarchy. Personally, I kind of like this system, but I can assure you this is not democracy. It's a totally different story.
Okay, this is a political consideration which is difficult to comment upon. I think that in privacy you have several levels. There is the theoretical or philosophical notion of privacy, which is someone reading my email, is someone accessing my information, and you have the one about my information is being exposed to everybody. The practical one. So there is the philosophical one that I don't want anybody by way of principle to be able to look into what I'm doing, and there is the one which is I don't want my data to be widely exposed. So I think that there are two different notions, and you actually see them in the way in which we manage things, and in which in scientific conference people propose systems to deal with privacy. When I'm asked about it personally, what I say is my answer is that I frankly don't care that the NSA or the DGSE or whoever reads my email, but what I want them to do is answer my emails, also treat them. When a student asks me if I'm available or not, they look into my agenda and say, no, he's not available. So by way of joking, I say that I actually don't care that those people, those agencies read my emails. But I would very much care if my information would be thrown out on the web.
Do you care that they read your email?
Yeah, I do. There's another point to take into consideration. That is that the political regime we're living right now is not going to last forever. It's going to change, in good or bad, who knows, but it's going to change. And for example, having a service like the NSA or the French Secret Service, knowing that, for example, I'm gay, which is totally okay right now. I don't fear anything being gay. I could, in 5 or 10 years, be in big trouble. Let's pretend I'm a communist right now. I'm allowed to be a communist in France right now. I could go to jail in 10 years for that. Who knows? And filing people and putting them under scrutiny 24/7 is going to give the state a huge amount of knowledge on citizens. And if this head of state change, things could get really, really ugly.
All right. Whether or not we have a dystopia or maybe just an EU kind of middle-of-the-road kind of future is...
soft dictatorship, as
we'll
stated
see.
recently in Libération.
Certainly, Fabrice Epelboin taking a hard view to what today's bill all means. I want to thank David Nakash. I also want to thank Eva Bloom-Dumontet for being with us from London, and of course our Berlin correspondent, Jessica Saltz. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to James Creedon. A lot of criticism for that bill, but as we said, 2/3 of French public opinion in favor.
That's right. A lot of people on social media in France evoking films that are dystopian, as you just said earlier, Francois, films like The Matrix, where we're entering an age now of 100% supervision by the state, or at least potential for 100% supervision. Also, lots of quotes from George Orwell's 1984 appearing on social media as well, and references to the thought police who can sort of read your thoughts or get into your thoughts at any given moment. References to this quote from the Star Wars trilogy. So this is how liberty dies. I saw that shared quite a lot, indeed, the extract from the film there as well. What else do we have? Some people saying, look, let's not be naive, especially after what we saw with the NSA scandal in the US. I would like to get angry, says this person, but the thing is, the only thing that has changed now is that we know what's going on. In other words, is this already really the practice of security services in France and elsewhere? And now it's just being, I suppose, legislated for. Elsewhere, a lot of references as well on social media to the liberty versus security problem, I suppose. And others have been drawing reference to that as well. This one I thought was pretty funny. Somebody sending their thumbprint to the Twitter account of Place Beauvau, which is the Interior Ministry, saying, "Let's just get this over and done with, shall we?" So lots of
Looks like they don't need fingerprints as much as they used to.
Right, exactly. Well, who knows? Also, a quote here by Benjamin Franklin: "When a people are ready to sacrifice a little freedom for a little security, they deserve neither, in fact." And that quote being re-quoted again here, along with this image, where you see a little bit more security being given on the leash, I suppose, by Lady Liberty, and in the end, security has gobbled up the whole principle of freedom.
Dystopian enough.
So I suppose perhaps it's not surprising to see on social media people expressing concern, Francois, about this bill, or this law.
All right, the minority opinion being heard. Many thanks, James Creedon. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.